Watson.
Where is your stepfather?
He's all right. I left him in the warehouse when I ran to call for help.
Well, that's that, then. It would seem so.
I'm afraid not, Watson. Mendoza may be dead, but the money is gone.
My men swear they shot to frighten him, not to kill him. Seems strange to say that they must have missed. Rather pallid, I should say, for a Latin chap. Your Mendoza turns out to be an East End villain by the name of Harry Marks. Bookmaker, moneylender, and part-time prizefighter.
But never engaged in blackmail or kidnapping.
Not until now.
I think we've been taken for fools.
By whom?
Perhaps by the man who was kidnapped.
McIntyre, never not a man of his reputation. I was at school with him. You should see some of the men I went to school with. Well, if it wasn't McIntyre, it was his son. A stepson, James McIntyre, married a widow.
Whatever the relationship, I don't believe that young man, Freddie, ever delivered the money to the so-called Mendoza.
You may not believe it, Holmes, but you can't disprove it.
If I can't disprove it, we must find the man who can.
Mr. Holmes.
I've been expecting you, Mr. McIntyre. I believe you and Dr. Watson went to school together.
Yes. Hello, James. How are you?
Hello, John.
Should we go up?
My wife is very ill. She has a rare blood complaint. I fear she has not long to live. The shock, the scandal, it would have been too much for her to bear.
Forgive me, Mr. McIntyre, but wasn't it a shock for her your being kidnapped?
Not the same.
Your stepson was in desperate need of money. He threatened to go to your wife, his mother.
Exactly. She's not rich, though her family has money, but they've helped Freddie so many times before. I just did not wish her to suffer that anguish.
And so you concocted this scheme between you?
Yes.
And who was Mendoza?
I don't know. A friend of Freddie's, I think. I was to lie low in the empty warehouse for a few days. Freddie arrived with a suitcase. They handed it over.
But it was empty.
Well, that's where I got confused. The chap took the suitcase, haired off with it. Obviously, he thought all the money was inside. But it was in a belt which Freddie tied round me.
Ingenious.
Indeed. Since it was Lestrade who put you in the police van to take you home and wave goodbye to the money.
I was appalled by the man's death, of course. Freddie told me it was an accident, but now I'm not so sure.
You've good reason to doubt your stepson, Mr. McIntyre, but why do you come to me? You should confess to the police.
I'm not asking you to save my neck. Please believe me, I would confess willingly. But I beg you to spare my wife. Let her spend her last few months in peace.
You ask a great deal. At best, you both engaged in a fraud. At worst, you could add murder. I realize you've been duped. And I appreciate your concern for your wife, but even so... I can only promise that we'll do the best we can. What was the motto of your old school, Watson? Do I recollect correctly?
Indeed you do. Nihil desperandum.
May the thought sustain you.
Thank you, Holmes. And God bless you.
Nihil desperandum. Never despair.
I'll remind you of that, if it's necessary.
Return to the scene of the crime, Watson. What crime? And are we now allowing ourselves to become accomplices?
Freddie's a young rotter. He laughs at his stepfather and even dares to go to the law.
But what was Mendoza's role? Did he think he had the money? Surely he must have.
And if the police didn't shoot him, who did?
If Freddie murdered him, why? Man was just an accomplice. What would you pay him? 5%? 10%?
I wouldn't pay him anything.
Watson, I've often teased you. But this time you have solved the case.
What did I say?
Come.
Holmes!
The devil. I decided to return them to you.
Oh, you. Of course. It would have been. It doesn't put me off my breakfast.
It was Harry Marks to whom you owed the money. You told him if he helped you, he could have that and a lot more.
Shouldn't you be reporting all this to the police, Mr. Holmes?
Marmalade. Inside the warehouse, you switched the cases, fed Harry the empty one, then you shopped him to the police, and just to make sure, you shot him.
The whole thing was masterminded by my stepfather. That will be my story. He went to school with Dr. Watson. Did you know that?
I believe it was mentioned. I don't need to go to the police, Freddie. There is another kind of justice.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about rough justice, my boy. The kind that Harry Marks and his friends understand. They think he was shot by the police. I shall tell them the truth.
They'll never believe
You
you.
think the name of Sherlock Holmes is not known in the East End? They will believe me. Pity. I would have said you had a promising career in crime. Excellent marmalade. Thank you.
Now, look here, Holmes.
Goodbye, Freddie.
Do you think it'll work?
We'll know in a few minutes. Without a confession, I don't think he can be convicted of murder, but we might get the money back.
You think he'll make a run for it?
He was certainly very nervous when I mentioned my connections in the East End.
I didn't know you had any.
My reputation permits me to lie.
Are you lying?
Certainly. Cabby!
We're ready for him if he makes a run for it. He's coming out.
as his mother's concerned, it's a respectable way to die.
Sad ending.
Yes, but a just one. Why do you think they ran, though?
Strahd's men scared him, and I must say they did an excellent job. He obviously thought they were mates of Harry Marks.
Yes, they looked really villainous. Really fine actors, I'd say.
A question of acting, more a question of physiognomy. Did you notice the shape of the heads, for example?
How do you mean?
Square. Policemen's heads need to be square to seat the helmet firmly.
Now, really, Holmes.
It's the helmet pressing down which produces the perpetual scowl.
I see what you mean. Yes. What about the mouth?
I'm glad you asked that. You mean the grim set of the lips.
Exactly. My men do not have...
You live with it, you don't notice it. The Strahd sees nothing but policemen from morning till night, except, of course, the criminals he's arrested.
Who also look grim. It's quite extraordinary. He just doesn't seem to understand. In my opinion, it has something to do with the boots policemen wear.
The boots don't help.
They give that sort of strange, strangled look. Not unlike the expression on the faces of those shrunken heads.
You've become very observant, Watson. I've noticed the same thing. Now, take the Strahd's head, for example. It could resemble a shrunken head at times.
Oversized.
Of course, of course. I can imagine the Strahd shrunken, can't you?
Excuse me.